Come in, number 169, your time is up. Yes, it is time once again for me to get self-indulgent and just ramble on for a while about something that I really enjoy. And this time up, I'm going to talk Red Dwarf. No particular impetus for this. I don't think they've got new stuff coming out right now. I'm actually a couple of series behind on this show. I haven't found the time, and it's not something that's easy for me to get a hold of without having to shell out to actually buy it. Which, you know, I don't like to blind buy anymore, even stuff that I like and expect to be good. So I am a little bit behind, but I've loved this show for a very long time. Now, on the off chance that anyone watching this doesn't know what Red Dwarf is a British science fiction comedy show. And it's been around since the 80s. And if your first thought is, oh, wow, must be like 30 series worth of this thing. No, not so much, because as is not excessively uncommon with British television, they do a series every now and then when they feel like it. You know, when they can wrangle the cast, when the writers have enough ideas, and so forth. So they don't do one every year. And there have been long hiatuses between them, especially lately. So that there's that. But I love this show so much. The way I found this show, and I don't know, I imagine most folks in my circle who would be subscribed to me have heard of this show because, you know, the internet spreads word around. But I found out about this show way before, like, the internet existed, but it wasn't much of a thing yet. So I found out about this show in middle school. I had a friend, I don't know how he got a hold of it, but he lent me a VHS that had a couple of episodes from the first series of this show, and I immediately loved it. Primarily for the character dynamics, but I like the setting and the premise as well. Since I'm going to gush most about the characters, we'll set those aside. Let's talk about that setting and premise. Setting and premise is at some point in the future, a number of years from now, doesn't actually matter, on a deep space ship called the Red Dwarf, there is the literal lowest ranked member of the crew by the name of Dave Lister. And he is just there to get a paycheck. He does not care about this job. You know, he's surrounded by people who are, you know, trying to work their way up the ladder, you know, lifetime commitment to this sort of, he doesn't care. He's just there because it's a way for him to make a bit of money so he can do something he'd actually like to do. He's a bit of a layabout. He's a bit of a slob, especially early on. And what ends up happening is he smuggles aboard a pet, a cat, specifically, that didn't go through quarantine. So that gets him in a lot of trouble. And when he refuses to hand that cat over to the captain so that he can dissect it and make sure it didn't have a disease, his punishment is to be put in stasis for the remainder of the journey, which, you know, just freezes him in time. And that the reason that that's a punishment is that means he's not going to be a drain on resources, and also that he's forfeiting the remainder of his pay for the rest of that trip. So he goes in thinking he's going to come out in 6 months. And instead, he comes out 3 million years later. Because what happened in the interim was there was a massive radiation leak, and it wiped out all the rest of the crew, and the computer could not let him out until the background had reached until the radiation had reached a safe background level. And so 3 million years later, he is alone on this ship, except not quite. There's the computer, which I mentioned before, known as Holly, which is very intelligent, but also going senile. So not as reliable as it should be for how smart it is. And I'm saying it at this point because depending on what series of the show you want, it's either a him or a her. I'll get into that a little bit later. And then there's the cat. And when I say the cat, I don't mean the cat that Lister smuggled on, but a descendant of that cat, because that cat, by coincidence of where she was when the ship got the radiation dose, she was pregnant when Lister got her. That's the first thing. And she was locked off in a place where she was safe from the radiation, and species evolved to the cat. And the cat is, you know, he looks like a person with some fangs, but his behavior, that's a cat. So there's him. He's around, but much like a pet cat you would have now, he likes Lister all right. He just doesn't really care He's super self-absorbed and all about his own thing. But additionally, Lister also has the company of a hologram of his old bunkmate, Arnold Rimmer. And Lister hates Rimmer. Rimmer hates him too. But the reason that he's around is Holly is projecting his stored personality as a hologram so that Lister has some proper company and he doesn't go crazy. Now, as the show goes on, other characters get brought in. By season 3, we have Crichton, who's an android who gets brought into things. Later on, we get additional characters like Kachansky and some other occasional off-again, on-again appearances from a lot of one-off characters as well. But that's your basic starting setup. And like I said, from series to series, it varies a lot. So like the first 2 series of this is very sort of locked location sitcom. It's very much about how, Lister and Rimmer don't get along, and it's the conflict of them trying to deal with each other. And it's very confined to the corridors and the couple of bunk beds in the Red Dwarf itself. Once we start getting to season 3, it expanded in scope quite a bit. They got a bigger budget. Crichton joined the team, so it was a larger cast. And they also started going off the ship more. They started traveling. They started exploring more. The show started to deal in bigger sci-fi ideas in a very comedic way. But, it got more ambitious, notably so. And it would do some odd tangents as it went down the line. Now, one of the first things you should know about Red Dwarf, if a reason that you like sci-fi in general is because you like knowing how things work and everything is logical and makes sense, this is not the show for you. Because this show, amongst other things, has little to no interest in continuity. If it contradicts something that was established as continuity previously, it doesn't even bother to retcon it or address it. It's just like, no, it's this now. Like a good example, the closest they ever came, like the one time they tried to, quote unquote, address a major shift in continuity, was at the start of Series 3. So the end of Series 2 ends on, I don't want to call it a cliffhanger, but a big setup for a massive status quo shakeup. And what it sets up that is about to happen is going to have massive implications, something you can't skip over and you can't not deal with. Except the show skips over it and doesn't deal with it. And then adds a character onto the crew who hadn't been a regular part of the cast before. Now, both the resolution of the plotline left over from Series 2 and the addition of the new character are covered in a Star Wars-style text crawl at the start of the first episode of Series 3. But that text crawl intentionally goes so fast you can't actually read it. And this was the show's way of saying, we are not doing this because we don't care. We're going to jump to the point at which we can do stuff we want to do. And that's basically the entire approach of the show. The show and its creators and its writers and its cast even have never felt the obligation to tie up and revisit and pay off stuff that they did earlier if they lose interest in it and decide they want to do something that cannot logically be the next step based off where they were. Like, we don't care. We're just going to jump to this because that's what we want to do. And that's the show is based around what ideas can we work with, what jokes can we tell. And the jokes I don't want to say they get thinner on the ground, but the show overall gets a little bit more melancholy in its later series as it sort of embraces the loneliness of Lister's situation a little bit more. But it does deal in some interesting sci-fi concept as it goes along with some of the things that they encounter, with some time travel stuff, with some physics weirdness and things like that. It does tackle interesting ideas, and also it can do character drama well at times. Also, like one of my favorite episodes is Series 3 Marooned, which is just Rimmer and Lister crashed on a planet, and it's just the two of them stuck for a while, and it's a great episode. So it can go for large scope, it can go for tiny and intimate. It always remembers to be funny, at least to some degree. Even in its more melancholy episodes, the jokes are still there. So it's really wonderful. But what makes this show awesome is ultimately the characters. I love this cast of characters. I'll sort of start with who for me is my least favorite, but he's still good, and that's Crichton the android. Now, as I said, he's a slightly later addition. He comes in Series 3, but he's been around so long at this point that he's generally considered one of the regulars. So with Crichton, I think it's just, for me, I've seen android tropes played out in too many other places. I think ultimately that's it. Crichton is a good character and a good comedic android, but he's probably the least unique in terms of characterization for this kind of character in this kind of setting. he is still well played, he's still interesting, he's still funny, but he is the most sort of, oh, we would expect that in a sci-fi comedy show sort of character. There's the cat, who I mentioned. The cat is awesome because oh man. So the cat, he is just so self-obsessed, and he's always on, and he's doing it practically for himself. Like, he'll just smoothly glide into a room, look around, and he just sees listeners and goes, oh, it's just you? What a waste of a good move. Or he'll tell them, hey, be careful, because if we pass any mirrors, I'm there for the day. And I love his self-obsession. And like I said, he does care about the other characters a little, but about as much as a real-life pet cat would be. And that's not a knock on cats. I do like cats. But, I mean, let's be honest. They kind of don't give a crap about people most of the time, and that is true for this cat. He's interested in him. You know, how can he relax? How can he look good? How can he eat? What can he attempt to woo? So that he's great, and he never gets old. Then there's Holly, the computer. Now, I mentioned it's either a he or a she, depending on when you come in. So, first two series, it was a guy. And then it went for a stretch as being a woman. And then Holly wasn't there. And then Holly came back as a guy. I don't know if they went back to the woman again in later series. As I said, I'm a couple series behind at this point. But my preference is slightly for the male version of Holly, not because it's a better performance. There's just a slight difference in characterization in that I feel like male Holly, you get a sense. I mean, Holly is not particularly stable and not particularly helpful in any case, but you get the sense with male Holly, you get that feeling that you used to have it together, but you kind of don't now. You know, you get a little bit of that vibe of somebody who used to be intelligent and it's been degrading over time. Whereas female Holly is a bit more just spaced out. Like you don't get as much of a vibe of, you used to have it together. It's a bit more of a, boy, you were always like this, weren't you? And again, that's just a general vibe, and neither is better or worse. It's a personal preference. But both of them are very good. Both of them are very funny, especially considering that all they get to be is a face on a screen and just delivering lines now and then, which, you know, sounds like an easy job, but you get so little interaction with the cast doing that, but they both do it quite well. I'm not going to get into some of the other characters who show up later, like Kachansky, because like fans have a really mixed feeling on her. I'm fine with her, but you know, that's just how it is. My favorite character, though, by far, not even close, Rimmer. I love Rimmer so much, and part of the reason I love Rimmer is a kind of character that should be insufferable. He shouldn't work. And I actually didn't realize this until I saw the pilot for the failed American version of Red Dwarf. I say failed. They didn't get past the pilot. They didn't get picked up to series. But I remember watching that, and I could not stand that Rimmer, because the Rimmer in the American version actually had pretty much almost all of the qualities that original flavor Rimmer did. But he was missing one key component, because Rimmer, the reason he should be annoying is he is completely self-serving. He has a sense of superiority about himself, yet at the same time, he is more than happy to cut corners if it's to his own benefit. He's always throwing people under the bus, never takes responsibility for himself. He's pedantic. He's obsessed with regulations, even though he can't remember what they are half the time. But again, remembers them when they are to his personal advantage. And, you know, he's just obsessed with climbing the ladder. Even after, like, the rest of the crew's dead, there's no ladder left to climb, he's still obsessed with that. And all of this should make for an insufferable character, but here's the key component that Rimmer has that the American version failed to get. He hates himself. Like, really, deep down, he hates himself. And that element of self-loathing gives him just enough of a sympathetic edge, and that sense that you now have that in common with Rimmer is like, I don't like you, but you don't like you either. Okay, well, we've got that at least. Whereas the American version didn't have that sense of inward directed hatred and sense of being unsuccessful. So in the American version, you had, you know, the blaming everyone else for his failure to move forward, but it didn't feel motivated by anything other than wanting to blame someone else. Whereas original Rimmer, it's very clearly motivated by he never wants to face the fact that he is in the situation he's in because of himself. but deep down, he also knows that's the case. And that is what makes him awesome. And not to mention, he's got a fantastic, I mean, all the characters, everyone has great chemistry with everybody. That's another one of the things about this show. I get the feeling that depending on which fans you ask, different fans will tell you which series are the best. You'll get wildly different answers depending on what people like. But I think even in the series that I don't like as much as others, what always pulls it forward is these people work so well together, and you feel like they are having fun, and so you get to have fun with them. That's honestly something that can paper over a lot of sins in any medium. If you're watching people enjoy themselves, honestly, I think that's the entire basis for why we even had the Ocean's 11 series of films. Honestly, the original Ocean's 11, structurally, narratively, is fine. It's not remarkable, but what's infectious about it is how much fun all these people seem to be happening, and that sort of vibe is very much present here in Red Dwarf for pretty much the whole run of it. Oddly enough, even in the first series, when the actors who play Rimmer and Lister did not actually get along very well, but it fed into the dynamic between those characters, especially in those early years, so it worked fine. But it was really, it's really fantastic, and it's these characters that make me want to come back. The settings, the ideas, the concepts, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they are, honestly, really cool ideas and really well executed, but other times it's like, that was fine, but man, that line, that zinger, that look that character gave the other one, that's why I'm here, and that's why I keep coming back. And it's just a wonderful mix of people and perspectives and characters constantly butting heads, yet also not having the option to not put up with each other. They have to, because they are all they have. There's nowhere else for them to turn, so they got to make this work, as much as inherently they can't ever make it work, like as a team and as a functioning group. But it is wonderful, it is funny, it is biting, it's touching at times, it is dark at times, but it is always worth coming back to see these characters. They're great characters in and of themselves, but especially to see them bounce off each other and to see the interplay. And ultimately, I will always come back to Lister and Rimmer and their dynamic, and Rimmer especially, as being the heart of what I cannot get enough of. But that's why I love Red Dwarf. Have you seen it? Why do you love it? Or why don't you love it? Or what series do you love and what ones didn't work for you? Because like I said, I don't have really a firm sense if there's any kind of consensus among the fandom as to what ones are the quote-unquote good series and which ones aren't. But I'd be curious to hear from you folks. So whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A whole bunch of stuff you can do because there's buttons and there's links, including one to my Patreon if you feel like supporting me that way. If you don't sweat it. There's other links to look at as well, but you know what? If you don't want to click on any of them, that's no skin off my back, because at the end of the day, you folks are the council, and I just run the meetings. So until next time, this council is adjourned. You smegheads.